Hey, thanks for the intro. I'm going to share my screen here and take you all through kind of the last 20 years or so of fire and beetle and forest change in Colorado. So I'm a professor at Colorado State University. I went to school at the University of Colorado Boulder. So I've been working in Colorado since the mid to late 1990s on wildfire. And I also work all the way to Montana. I have projects in Southeast Alaska. And I also do a lot of work in Patagonia and the Coast Range of Patagonia and the Andes ranges. So working all over the Americas. I mostly work in higher elevation or wetter forests. So places that normally don't burn all that often. I will admit, when I finished my PhD in 2005, I was genuinely worried that I wasn't going to have anything to study or work on because the systems that I study burn so infrequently and change is so slow in general that I was very concerned. And as you'll see from my presentation today, I had no reason to be concerned. As I get started here today, I also wanted to throw out a poll to everyone. It's almost 11 years to the day. I guess it's 11 years to the day almost. I gave a talk to some utility folks in Denver at a luncheon. And I think it was summer 2014 or summer 2013. And I got some really interesting kind of feedback there. And fire was viewed as this thing that was pretty far off on the horizon. And I'm kind of curious how you all are viewing it at this point in time. So if you could do that, I'd appreciate it. I am going to keep going here though. So my goals are to review some of the recent patterns of wildfire. I put together a snapshot of beetle and fire in Colorado. So while I'm going to focus on Colorado, most of my research is focused on Colorado, it's indicative of what's happening throughout the West and globally. We see Chile and Argentina having mega fires and a massive uptick in fires. Europe, in particular, the Mediterranean basin. Of course, right now we have a massive amount of fires that are happening in Western Canada as well as Eastern Canada. And the problem is migrating to Wisconsin and New Jersey and Quebec and wetter forests in general. So I want to use Colorado as this case study for what we can learn. What have we learned from the last 20 years? On the right side, a couple of the fires that are prominent here, the Cameron Peak fire and the East Troublesome fire, both burning at the same exact time in August and September 2020. Then a little bit on how did we get here and is this the new normal? So I'm going to start off with this map in 1996, and I'm going to take this all the way through 2020. All of the red patches, this is the state of Colorado, all the red patches are going to be fires. The lighter colored green are lower elevation montane forests, ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. Primarily the darker green are higher elevation, wetter forest types, spruce fir, lodgepole pine. And then of course we've got aspen mixed in all over the place. So the fires will be in red. The beetle outbreaks, Douglas fir beetle is in blue, mountain pine beetle in brown, and spruce beetle in gray. I can't really tell this story without mentioning the beetle aspects of all the forest change that have happened in the last 20 years or so. So 1996, not much fire had happened in the state of Colorado since, in particular, since about 1880 when we had a very large fire event. We hadn't had much fire for over 100 years, and we've got little things popping up here and there. And I'm just going to take you through this. We've jumped to 1999. And there are some fires, these red patches are popping up. We start to see some brown patches pop up for mountain pine beetle in 2000, no spruce beetle yet. And there's some Doug fir beetle popping up as well. 2001, 2002 was our first big fire year. The Hayman fire, kind of just to the southwest of Denver there, 137,000 acres was a huge wake-up call. We had fires all over the state in 2002. It was the start of this massive change that we've seen. 2003, beetles are spreading, mountain pine beetles spreading. 2004, the spruce beetle infestation starts up in the southern part of the state, and up around Steamboat, it's really getting going there. In the northern part of the state, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The exciting stuff hasn't even happened yet, and we're losing all of our greens in the background here from beetles and fire. 2011, at this point in time, 2011, well over 20% of our forests have been hit by some sort of beetle in the state. 12, 13, another big fire year. 14, more fire and beetle. 15, 16, 2017, 18. This is starting to be a horror movie. 2019 and 2020. So you can see there's been a lot of fire and a lot of beetle over this kind of 2002 to 2020 time period. And beetles continue. Mountain pine beetle has dramatically slowed down, but spruce beetle continues. And so I want to look at this and say, what can we learn from these things, from these fires? The first thing that we can learn is that we have extensive area burned. I don't think I need to stress this too much. If you're here in the state, you know that we have had a lot of wildfire across the West. We've had a lot of wildfire. So on the right side, you see that map of Colorado. All of those red patches, almost all of those are from wildfires since 2002 or 2002 to 2020. On the left side, you see acres burned from about 1985 to 2021 across the Western United States. And those numbers just keep coming up in millions of acres burned per year. If we take a longer kind of perspective of how much has been burning, on the right, you see a graph, and the year 0 is on the left side of that graph, and it goes up to the present point in time. And this is recreated from lake sediment study analyses, where we can go back for 4, 5, 6, 7,000 years at a time in some cases, and look at charcoal and sediment layers and reconstruct rates of burning. And you see that red squiggly line. That's how much burning has occurred over the last 2,000 years. So you see somewhere around the year 850, 900, we peaked out. But then if you zoom to the right, and that red triangle up high, way above everything else at the year 2000, that's our rate of burning over the last 20 years. So we are well in excess of any rates of burning in the last 20 years that we have seen for at least 2,000 years. The folks who did this research suggest that it's probably much longer than 2,000 years, but they have high confidence in that 2,000 year range. We also see a lot of beetle-killed forests are burning. There's no surprise. There's a lot of beetle kill out there on our landscape. We're getting close to 50% of our forests have been affected by some beetles since 2000, and those forests are burning. We also see that in Colorado in particular, and across the West, fires are moving upslope. In other words, they're burning higher elevation forests. And this is a cool little study. You can see the map on the right. The more red a region is, an ecoregion is, the darker that red is, the more the fire has moved up. So we're burning higher elevation forests. You can see for the most part, that map is red and orange. Up in the kind of Montana region where that number 41 is, that's the only place where we've seen where fires have really truly notably moved down in elevation. And then there are some of those kind of light blue, white colors that mean, yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of change. But in a lot of the West, we see fires are moving up. They're burning higher elevation for us. So that's one thing we can take away from these fires in the last 20 years. Another thing is synchrony of extreme wildfires. We oftentimes have, this is from August 15th, 2020, we oftentimes have multiple large wildfires burning at the same time. This stresses our ability for wildland firefighters to react and respond to these things, as we're starting to get spread so thin. And one more thing, fires are not following these rules. We had all these rules from fire science and fire ecology that we had constructed from watching fires over a century, reconstructing them with tree rings. things like high elevation, cool, wet forests don't burn. Well, that picture on the right side there is a really high elevation, cool, wet forest, and it burned in 2020. Snowpack is key to the fire season. So if you have early snow melt out date, or if you have low snowpack in the spring and April, you could have a big fire season. In 2020, the biggest fire year in Colorado, we had average snowpack in May. So that is no longer a rule that holds for us. Old growth and meadows are burning. In that bottom map that I'm showing you, that's Rocky Mountain National Park. Those green forests kind of in the background are old growth forests that I mapped using tree rings. And then the yellow patch on top of that is the 2020 East Troublesome Fire. It burned up to the Continental Divide and skipped over the Continental Divide, burning forests that we don't think have burned for thousands and thousands of years up in those high elevation drainages, like the photo in the top there. Another thing we've learned is fires are larger with greater impact. And now we commonly use this term mega fires. These are referring to large fires, oftentimes over 100,000 acres, although you can have some smaller fires that would constitute a mega fire because of its impact. They're not only larger, they have larger impacts, damages to with human casualties, economic losses, natural resources. Oftentimes, they're not just this one kind of one-off event and we're recovering. They have long-lasting social, economic, and environmental consequences. In Colorado, if we think about these mega fires, these very large, highly destructive fires, 20 of the largest wildfires in our state's history have come since the year 2000, and half of those have been since 2016. On the right, you see a photo from yesterday from the Canadian wildfires. And this was an interesting article that came out just yesterday that I wanted to share from the Washington Post. That graph on the bottom is the median annual acres burned per fire. So each fire, the size of each fire, in different time snaps. And you start to see where 2023 is ranking there. These fires thus far, just in early to mid-June, are massive compared to what we've had in the past. So why is this happening? Why do we have so much wildfire? So the potential drivers: fuel buildup from years of fire suppression. We got really good at fire suppression starting in the late 1940s, 1950s, post-World War II, when we had all this organization and equipment and everything. Is that the reason? Are we not spending enough on suppression resources today? Is it all the bark beetle killed forests? Are they propagating fire across the landscape? Or, of course, is it warming and climate change? So I just want to step through these very quickly. So this fire suppression question. Fire suppression mainly impacted lower elevation forests that are warmer and drier, where fires were more frequent. Up in the subalpine, where we've seen most of the burning since the year 2000, fires were only occurring every 200, 300, 400 years. 50, 60, 70 years of effective fire suppression has not altered those forests very much at all. So this combination of fire suppression being effective at low elevation and our fires moving upslope and burning mostly higher elevation fuels means that, yeah, they're probably contributing, but they're certainly not a main driver of this massive change in fire. Are we not spending enough on fire to fight fires anymore? On the left is that graph that I showed you earlier on the acres burned through time from 1985 to 2021. It keeps going up. On the right are annual expenditures on wildfire. And I think I saw just the other day that in 2022, we crossed the $4 billion mark. Those are billions of dollars in that graph. So we are regularly up above $2 billion. So we are keeping up with the spending, but we're not being anywhere near as effective as we once were. What about bark beetles? Are all those beetle-killed forests driving an uptick in fire? And if you just kind of look at this map, a lot of our big fires are covering areas that had a lot of high-severity bark beetle. A lot of these fires preceded extensive outbreaks. So that's kind of beetles aren't the main driver. The other thing is that these beetle-killed forests only burn during extreme fire weather conditions. So they're not going to burn this summer. We're having a cool, wet summer. They are, however, very challenging for firefighters to get in, to move around, to safely be able to evacuate. So that could be an amplifying influence. So I would rank this as a contributing factor, but not the main thing. So now we get to climate change and warming. The top panel shows you a reconstruction of climate and drought for the last 1,200 years in kind of the southwestern half of the Western US. The drought from 2000 through 2021 is the hottest, driest drought we can reconstruct using tree rings back to the year 800 by far. Is contributing to a longer fire season, earlier spring snow melt, and more acres burned. In the bottom panel, you see a graph that's showing the acres burned is the blue graph there. And the darker blue there is when we go in and we model how much we anticipate should be burning under different weather conditions, and then we throw climate change onto that model, you see the additional acres that are burning with climate change. So we would have had an uptick in wildfires anyway, but certainly not anywhere near where we are right now. So climate change is our smoking gun here. Really quickly, I get very cautious projecting hazards into the future. But as you can see, I said I was worried 20 years ago that I wouldn't have anything to study, and there's more than enough to study. Is this our new normal? Will fires start limiting other fires? We have started to see that occur, but fuels are recovering at the same time. So we're anticipating that we will continue on this trajectory for the next 2 to 3 decades of increased fire, unfortunately. So the take-homes from this talk, about the year 2000 marks a shift to a new era of fire, which is now being commonly referred to in the fire sciences community as the Pyrocene. The nature of fire has changed. Unprecedented rates of burning, larger fires, mega fires, more destructive fires, fires at higher elevations, fires not following the traditional rules. The drivers of the Pyrocene, the top 3 are climate change, and then we also have contributions from fire suppression and bark beetles, and climate projections suggest that we are going to have more fire, as well as fire projections in the coming decades. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm going to be really curious to see what the results of that poll were. It looks like, okay, I'm in the panic stage. Oh, we're evenly split. This is like some horrible election that has to go off to a runoff or something. I'm at a panic stage. We should have done something yesterday, 50%. So 10 years ago, I don't think I had anybody that would have said that. And then I think we have a few years before we have to panic is another wins out by a hair at 51%. So that's really interesting, a massive change in 10 years. So I was as surprised at the uptick of fire as perhaps a lot of the folks in the utility industry were. Thanks for the opportunity to present here.